He never raised his hand, not once. And for a long time, I used that fact the way you use a life jacket. Something to hold on to when the water gets too high. He never hit me, so it could not have been that bad. So I did not have the right to call it what it was. So I stayed, and stayed, and stayed, until staying felt less like a choice and more like the only thing I still knew how to do.
That was Simone, 31 years old, living in Atlanta, Georgia, in an apartment she had decorated herself, working a job she was good at, calling her mother every Sunday, and completely, quietly, invisibly disappearing inside a relationship that left no marks anyone could see. What happened to Simone Zane over 3 years with a man named Marcus is not a story about violence. It is a story about something far more patient than violence. Something that does not arrive in one dramatic moment, but in 100 small ones, so small, so reasonable sounding, so easy to explain away, that by the time you understand what has been happening, you have already forgotten who you were before it started. This is a story about the kind of hurt that does not leave bruises. And the question this story asks, the one that matters from the very beginning, is this: if there is no visible damage, how do you know when something is destroying you? Before this story goes any further, there are 3 things worth holding on to as it unfolds. The first: how does a woman who is intelligent, self-aware, and emotionally perceptive end up not recognizing that what is happening to her has a name? The second: at what point does love become the reason a person stays past the point where love is actually present in the room? And the third, the one Simone herself could not answer for the longest time, is this: when someone takes something from you so gradually that you never once felt the taking, how do you grieve what you lost? Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos now. Let us go back to Decatur, Georgia, and a woman who was raised to know her own mind, and what happened when she found herself inside a relationship specifically designed to make her forget it. Simone Reeves grew up in Decatur, Georgia, the oldest daughter of 2 people who loved each other loudly and imperfectly and without apology. Her mother, Cheryl, was a high school English teacher who kept stacks of novels on every surface of their home, and who told Simone, from the time she was old enough to understand, that a woman who knows her own mind is a woman nobody can talk out of it. Her father, Gregory, was a contractor who expressed love through action, showing up, building things, being present without requiring acknowledgement for it. Simone carried both of those things into adulthood: her mother's sharpness, her father's reliability. By 28, she had built a life in Atlanta that felt genuinely hers. A project management role at a tech firm, a circle of 3 college friends, and a 1-bedroom apartment in East Atlanta she had decorated carefully over 2 years, and that felt, when she walked through the door at the end of a long day, exactly like herself. She was not looking for Marcus when she found him. She was not arriving from loneliness or the kind of vulnerability that makes a person accept things they would otherwise recognize immediately. She was simply a woman living her life at a rooftop birthday party on a Saturday evening in October, when a man sat down beside her and said something that made her laugh so hard she spilled her drink down her own arm. Marcus Webb was 34 years old, a financial consultant from Marietta with an easy smile and a specific talent for making a woman feel like the most carefully considered person in any room he occupied with her. He remembered details. He called when he said he would call. He created around the relationship a warmth and safety that Simone recognized as real when she found herself inside it. In the first 3 months, he was, by every visible measure, exactly what a caring partner looks like. This matters for what comes next. Coercive control does not begin with cruelty. It begins with attentiveness so precise it feels like being truly seen. And for a woman who has spent her life being sharp and self-sufficient, being seen that carefully by another person is not a small thing. It is exactly the kind of thing that makes a person want to stay. The first sign appeared 4 months in, and Simone talked herself out of it before she had fully felt it. She had plans with her closest friend Danielle on a Friday evening, dinner at a restaurant they had been trying to book for 6 weeks. Marcus had known about it. On Friday afternoon, he called and said he had had a genuinely terrible week and that he needed her that evening. He was careful to say he was not asking her to cancel. He was simply telling her where he was. Simone sat with her phone in her hand for 40 seconds. Then she called Danielle and rescheduled. She told herself this was what people who loved each other did. She was not wrong about that individually. What she could not yet see was that this single true statement was being used to build a pattern she had not yet been shown the full shape of. This is the first thing worth understanding about how coercive control actually operates. Because it is the part most people get wrong. It does not look like control. It looks like need. It looks like vulnerability. It looks like a partner who loves you so much that your absence creates a visible wound. And because most women have been taught that responding to the people they love when those people are hurting is what love requires, the response comes naturally. It comes from the best part of a person. And the person applying the pressure understands that. The pressure is not random. It is calibrated specifically to the frequency at which the target responds. The canceled dinner was rescheduled twice more before it finally happened 3 weeks later. When Simone came home that evening, Marcus was sitting in the living room with one lamp on and the television dark. He said he was fine when she asked. He said it in the tone that communicates the precise opposite. Simone spent the next 2 hours trying to locate what was wrong. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because the atmosphere in the room suggested she had, and managing that atmosphere had already become something she did without deciding to. That is the second mechanism worth understanding. Marcus never told Simone she was wrong. He asked questions, careful, concerned-sounding questions that accumulated across months into a single consistent message. You cannot fully trust your own perception without my help. You really think that is how it happened? Are you sure you are not being a little sensitive? I just want to make sure you are seeing this clearly. Each sentence, isolated, sounds like a caring partner, delivered to the same person across 18 months of daily life. Those sentences become the slow, systematic erosion of a person's confidence in their own internal compass. And when a person stops trusting their internal compass, they become dependent on an external source for what is real. When the only available external source of what is real is the person who has been quietly dismantling the internal one, the architecture of control is complete. Not with a lock, not with threats, with questions, with concern, with the deliberate weaponization of love. By month 6, Simone had canceled on Danielle 3 more times. She had stopped mentioning work achievements because Marcus had a way of responding with careful questions that left her feeling vaguely inadequate rather than proud. She had begun checking in about her plans before making them. Not because she was asked to, but because not checking in created an atmosphere she found exhausting to manage. She told herself this was consideration. She was working with the information available inside a system specifically designed to make the true information unavailable. Simone stopped trusting what she saw, then what she felt, then what she had always known about herself with certainty. She edited herself constantly. Her words, her plans, her reactions, running everything through an internal filter that asked one question before anything else: will this cost me something tonight? She sat at her kitchen table one evening, going through work emails she had already read 3 times, a half-eaten dinner beside her gone cold. She was exhausted in a way sleep did not reach. She still set her alarm, still made coffee, still drove to work. But she was doing all of it from inside a version of herself that had been progressively compressed, and the energy required to maintain. The surface was consuming everything that had once existed beneath it. Her friend Danielle called on a Thursday evening and said something Simone would think about for the next 4 months. She said, "I feel like I am losing you. I feel like you are disappearing and you cannot see it from inside." Simone told her she was fine. She told her she did not understand the relationship. She repeated the conversation to Marcus that evening. He set his fork down, reached across the table, placed his hand over hers, and said, gently, in the warmth he deployed precisely for moments like this, that sometimes the people who love us most struggle to accept who we are becoming. That growth can look threatening to people who knew us before it started. Simone held on to that sentence for 3 weeks. She repeated it to herself when Danielle texted, and she did not respond. She did not understand yet that the sentence had been specifically constructed to separate her from the one person who was consistently telling her the truth. This is the third mechanism, and the most important. Isolation rarely looks dramatic. It rarely looks like a locked door or a confiscated phone. Most of the time, it looks like a reasonable-sounding idea delivered gently by someone you trust at the exact moment you are most vulnerable to receiving it. The people being isolated from you do not disappear. They are simply reframed, slowly, in the register of concern, as people who cannot handle your growth, who are attached to who you used to be, who do not fully see you the way your partner does. By the time Simone understood what had been happening, the circle around her had been quietly shrinking for 2.5 years, and the person who had drawn it had never once left a mark. The moment she finally saw it did not arrive dramatically. It arrived the way most real truths arrive, quietly, sideways, in an ordinary moment when her defenses were down, because she was somewhere safe enough to lower them. She was at her parents' house in Decatur for her father Gregory's birthday. A Sunday afternoon in November. Cheryl had cooked all day, and the house had the smell that meant something irreplaceable to the people who had grown up inside it. Simone was sitting at the kitchen table, watching her mother move from the stove to the counter and back again, and she felt, for the first time in longer than she could accurately calculate, completely relaxed. Not performing, not monitoring, just present. Cheryl turned from the stove and looked at her daughter for a long, careful moment. Then she said 4 words. "Baby, when did you get so quiet?" Simone opened her mouth to say she did not know what her mother meant. Then she stopped, because she knew exactly what her mother meant. The knowing arrived all at once, and with the completeness of something that had been waiting just below the surface for a very long time. She turned and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard, where she had spent her entire childhood because she could not look at her mother's face while she was understanding what she was understanding. She had gotten quiet because quiet was safe. She had gotten careful because careful cost less. She had spent 2.5 years editing the full version of herself, down to the version that did not create an atmosphere she would have to spend the rest of the evening managing. And she had done it so thoroughly for so long that she had stopped noticing she was doing it. She drove home from Decatur and sat in the parking lot of her apartment building for 45 minutes with the engine off and her phone face down on the passenger seat. She did not call ahead to say she was outside. She had been doing that automatically for over a year. She sat in the silence of her own car and asked herself a question she had been circling for months without landing on it directly. If she described this relationship to a stranger, without the context, without the explanations, without the part where she told herself this was simply what love required, what would she actually say? She sat with the answer. Then she went inside. She did not end things that night. The version of this story where a woman has one moment of clarity and immediately leaves is built for narrative convenience rather than human truth. She saw it clearly for the first time that evening. Then she spent 4 more months gathering herself back from the places she had distributed herself across 2.5 years. She called Danielle and told her everything. Not the edited version, but the actual sequence of events, as she now understood them. Danielle listened without interrupting. When Simone finished, Danielle said, "I know. I have been waiting for you to get here." Those 5 words undid something in Simone that had been knotted for 2 years. She sat on her kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet, and she let it be undone. She found a therapist named Dr. Renee Okafor, a Black woman in her 40s with a direct, careful way of saying things that made Simone feel both seen and safe. In their 3rd session, Dr. Okafor said, "Abuse is not defined by the presence of physical violence. It is defined by the presence of control." Simone wrote that sentence in a notebook she kept on her kitchen counter and read it every morning for 3 weeks, before she made coffee, before she picked up her phone, before the day required anything from her. She learned the language. Coercive control, gaslighting, isolation. each word landing like a door opening in a house she had been locked inside without knowing the doors existed. She was not crazy. She was not too sensitive. She was not the problem. There was a name for what had been done to her, and having the name gave her back the thing that had been most deliberately taken: the ability to trust what she already knew. She ended things on a Tuesday evening in March. She said what she needed to say clearly, without an extended speech, without staying to manage what happened on the other side of it. That last part, not staying, was the hardest thing she had ever done. The impulse to smooth the atmosphere was so deeply installed that walking away from it felt physically wrong. She walked away anyway. She drove to Danielle's apartment and sat on her couch for 3 hours and ate the food Danielle put in front of her without explaining or justifying a single thing. She simply sat inside a space that was safe and let herself be there. The weeks that followed were disorienting in a way she had not prepared for, not because she missed Marcus, but because the constant vigilance that had occupied so much of her interior life for 2.5 years was suddenly gone, and she did not know what to do with the space it left. She kept reaching for the filter, editing sentences before she spoke them, calculating the cost of ordinary decisions, finding that the cost was gone. Her nervous system had been trained to expect consequence, and it took weeks to learn that the consequence had been removed. Then the space began to fill. She called Danielle on a Tuesday for no reason except she wanted to hear her voice. She stayed 2 hours at a work event and said what she actually thought without running a single word through the filter first. She sat at her mother's kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon in April and felt again that complete unguarded relaxation. And this time it was not a contrast telling her something was wrong. It was simply what Sunday afternoons felt like now. She started writing in a journal on her kitchen counter, not to be seen, but simply to practice saying a true thing in her own voice, without checking first whether it was acceptable. The journal became pages. She crossed out nothing. Simone is 33 years old now. She lives in the same East Atlanta apartment that still feels, when she walks through the door, exactly like herself. She sees Dr. Okafor twice a month. She has dinner with Danielle every other Friday without canceling once. She calls her mother on Sunday mornings. She does not edit herself before she speaks. She does not call what happened to her a small thing, because there were no bruises. Because the absence of visible damage has never been evidence of the absence of harm. A person can be controlled without being touched. A relationship can dismantle you without leaving a single mark. And the pattern at the center of Simone's story, coercive control, emotional manipulation, the systematic erosion of a person's trust in her own perception, is one of the most common and least visible patterns in intimate relationships. It does not require violence. It requires only two things: a person who understands exactly what their partner responds to, and the willingness to use that understanding as a tool. It leaves no bruises. It leaves something far harder to heal than bruises. It leaves a woman no longer certain of what is real. The fact that it leaves no marks is not evidence that it is not serious. The fact that it leaves no marks is precisely what makes it so serious. And the fact that it leaves no marks is the reason so many women spend years holding on to the absence of physical violence as proof that what happened to them did not count. It counted. It has always counted. The only question that has ever mattered is not whether the harm was visible. It is whether the person inside it finally finds the language to name it. Simone found hers, and the journal on her kitchen counter, open to the current page, a pen resting in the center fold, not a single line crossed out, is the quietest and most complete evidence of everything she got back. Before I let you go, I want to sit with you for just a moment, because if something in this story landed in a familiar direction, that is not a coincidence. Maybe you are inside something right now that has no bruises but has been taken from you in ways you are only beginning to name. Maybe you got out and are still working through what it left behind. Maybe you love someone who is inside it and you have been looking for the language to reach them. I want to ask you something in the comments. Was there a moment when you realized what was happening to you had a name you had not been using? Drop it below, or just leave a heart. I read every single one, And if this story reached you, pass it to one person who needs it. You never know who needs to hear that it counts. This is Breaking Quiet Patterns. New stories every week. Subscribe so the next one finds you. Stay quiet, stay aware. Break the pattern.